For decades, agriculture has been sold the same promise over and over again. More technology means more efficiency. More data means better decisions. More tools mean less work. It sounds logical enough to survive a PowerPoint slide, which is exactly where most of these ideas were born. But if you step out of the conference room and into an actual field, the story starts to crack almost immediately. Modern farming is drowning in technology. Sensors in the soil, satellites in the sky, dashboards glowing in offices miles away from the land they claim to understand. Apps that track weather, moisture, nitrogen, machinery performance, crop stress, market prices, carbon credits, and somehow still manage to miss the one thing that actually matters: whether the decision made today will make the farm more profitable tomorrow. The irony is brutal. Agriculture has never had more information, yet farmers have never been more uncertain. The system promised clarity and delivered noise. Before this avalanche of technology, farming decisions were simpler. Not easy, simple. A farmer knew his land because he walked it. He knew where water pooled after rain, where soil stayed shallow, where yields always disappointed no matter what he tried. These weren't data points on a map. They were patterns burned into memory over decades. Experience wasn't romantic, it was efficient. Today, that same knowledge is often overridden by recommendations generated by models trained on generalized data sets that barely resemble the specific field they're applied to. The algorithm says apply more nitrogen. The dashboard says stress index is rising. The consultant says trust the system. And if the result is bad, nobody is accountable. The farmer pays the bill anyway. Technology didn't remove uncertainty. It redistributed responsibility away from humans and into systems that can't be questioned in real time. When intuition fails, you adjust. When software fails, you submit a ticket. This is where the narrative starts to flip. Because the problem isn't that technology exists in agriculture. The problem is that it arrived without a filter. Everything that could be digitized was digitized. Everything that could be measured was measured. And everything that could be sold as smart was sold aggressively, regardless of whether it solved a real problem or just created a new subscription. The modern farm is no longer just a biological system. It's an IT infrastructure. And IT infrastructures are fragile. They depend on connectivity, compatibility, updates, licenses, and vendors staying alive long enough to support last year's hardware. None of those things grow food. A sensor that fails silently can mislead an entire season. A software update can break integrations at the worst possible time. A platform shutdown can wipe years of historical data overnight. These are not theoretical risks. They happen constantly. They are simply normalized as part of innovation. Meanwhile, the cost curve keeps climbing. Technology was supposed to reduce labor and increase margins. In many cases, it replaced labor with expenses. Hardware leases, software subscriptions, consultants to explain the software. More time spent managing systems instead of managing land. Efficiency became performative. It looks good in reports. It photographs well for marketing. But on the balance sheet, the gains are thinner than advertised. There's also a cultural shift buried under all of this. Farming used to reward judgment. Now it often rewards compliance. Follow the prescription map. Follow the AI recommendation. Follow the workflow. Deviating from the system feels risky, even when the system is obviously wrong. When intuition contradicts the dashboard usually wins. Not because it's smarter, but because it feels safer to blame later. And this is how complexity sneaks in. Not all at once, but layer by layer. One tool doesn't ruin a farm. 10 half-integrated tools do. Each one adds friction. Each one promises optimization. Together, they create paralysis. At some point, the question stops being, does this technology work? And becomes, does this technology justify its existence? That's a much harder question, and one the industry avoids answering honestly. Because if you strip away the hype, a lot of agricultural technology doesn't fail spectacularly. It fails quietly. It works just well enough to avoid being removed, but not well enough to fundamentally change outcomes. It survives by inertia. This is why comparing modern farming to past farming feels uncomfortable. Not because the past was better in every way, but because it exposes how much unnecessary complexity we've accepted as progress. Tractors are objectively better. GPS guidance is objectively better. Soil analysis is objectively better. But somewhere along the line, the industry stopped subtracting. No one asks what should be removed. What can be simplified? What data doesn't need to be collected? What decision doesn't need an algorithm? Growth became additive only. More features, more metrics, more layers, less clarity. And here's the part that nobody likes admitting. Farmers are not anti-technology. They are anti-waste. When a tool clearly saves time, fuel, or money, it spreads instantly. When it doesn't, it lingers only because walking away feels like admitting failure. This is not a story about rejecting the future. It's a story about questioning the version of the future being sold. A future where farms resemble data centers more than ecosystems. Where success is measured by adoption rates instead of profitability. Where the loudest innovations are often the least useful. The uncomfortable truth is that agriculture didn't become inefficient because it lacked technology. It became inefficient because it adopted too much of the wrong kind, too quickly, and without enough skepticism. And that raises the real question this video is building toward. Not whether technology belongs in farming, but whether farming was forced to adapt to technology that never adapted to farming in the first place. This is only the beginning. Once complexity becomes normal, it stops being questioned. That is exactly what happened in modern agriculture. Tools that were meant to assist decision-making quietly became mandatory infrastructure. A farm today can lose more productivity from a software outage than from a bad weather forecast, and that alone should make anyone pause. The industry likes to frame this as evolution. In reality, it's dependency. When planting, spraying, harvesting, and logistics all rely on interconnected digital systems, a single point of failure can ripple through the entire operation. And unlike weather, these failures are man-made. Poorly designed interfaces, forced updates, vendor lock-in disguised as innovation. What makes this worse is that most agricultural technology is not built by people who farm. It is built by engineers optimizing for scalability, not seasonality. For quarterly growth, not harvest cycles. A bug in a fintech app is annoying. A bug in a farm management system can cost a year of income. Yet both are treated with the same development mindset. This mismatch shows up everywhere. Interfaces overloaded with features nobody asked for. Alerts that triggered too often to be taken seriously. Recommendations that ignore local context because local context is hard to model and expensive to maintain. The land becomes abstracted into pixels, and once that happens, bad decisions start to feel acceptable. Data quality is the quiet killer here. Sensors drift, satellites misread stress, manual inputs get rushed or skipped during busy seasons. But the system rarely tells you when the data is wrong. It just keeps calculating. Garbage in, confident output out. The illusion of precision is far more dangerous than acknowledged uncertainty. And then there is integration. Or rather, the lack of it. Every platform promises compatibility. Very few deliver it cleanly. Farmers end up acting as system integrators, manually reconciling maps, formats, and recommendations that were never designed to work together. This is not innovation. This is unpaid labor. The more tools you add, the more time you spend maintaining the tools themselves. Updates need testing. Devices need calibration. Licenses need renewal. Training never ends because the interface changes faster than muscle memory can keep up. The mental load increases, even if the physical load decreases. Burnout doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. What's rarely discussed is how this complexity shifts risk. When a farmer makes a bad call based on experience, the lesson is immediate and personal. When a farmer follows a system-generated recommendation that fails, responsibility becomes diffuse. The vendor blames implementation, the consultant blames configuration, the data provider blames variability. The farmer absorbs the loss. This is not accidental. Systems that cannot be easily challenged are systems that protect themselves. The more opaque the model, the harder it is to argue against it. Transparency is talked about constantly and delivered almost never. You are told to trust the model, but not allowed to see its assumptions. Meanwhile, the economic logic becomes distorted. Farms invest in technology not because it clearly improves outcomes, but because not investing feels like falling behind. Adoption becomes defensive. Nobody wants to be the one who skipped the tool that everyone else is using, even when results are ambiguous. Fear becomes a stronger driver than evidence. This is how farms end up over-equipped and under-optimized. Shiny machinery paired with thin margins. Advanced analytics paired with basic agronomic mistakes. The tools exist, but the signal is buried under noise. Ironically, the most effective farms are often the ones that use less technology, not more. They pick specific tools that solve specific problems and ignore the rest. They are selective, almost ruthless, about what earns a place in their workflow. That mindset used to be standard. Now it is treated as resistance. The truth is, agriculture doesn't need more innovation. It needs better subtraction, removing tools that don't pay for themselves. Removing data streams that don't change decisions. Removing processes that exist only because software demands them. Progress is not accumulation, it is alignment, and alignment is impossible when technology leads and farming follows. The land doesn't update itself every quarter. Seasons don't care about release cycles. Crops don't respond to dashboards. They respond to soil, water, timing, and human judgment. The longer the industry ignores this mismatch, the more fragile the system becomes. Not less. More tools do not automatically create resilience. Often, they do the opposite. Which brings us to the uncomfortable middle ground. The realization that some technology genuinely works, and some genuinely doesn't. The problem is that they are sold together, bundled under the same futuristic narrative, making it harder to separate value from noise. And that separation is exactly what needs to happen next. Once you start separating what works from what doesn't, a pattern becomes obvious. The technologies that actually improved agriculture share one thing in common. They reduced friction. They didn't ask for attention. They didn't demand constant management. They quietly made existing decisions faster, cheaper, or more precise without trying to replace the person making them. GPS guidance is a perfect example. It didn't come with a philosophy. It didn't claim to revolutionize thinking. It just reduced overlap, saved fuel, and improved accuracy. Farmers adopted it fast because the payoff was immediate and measurable. No subscription theatrics. No buzzwords. Just results. The same is true for basic mechanization improvements, reliable soil sampling, and simple variable rate applications when they are grounded in real agronomy. These tools respect the workflow instead of hijacking it. They integrate into farming instead of forcing farming to integrate into them. Now compare that to most modern, AI-driven platforms. They promise optimization at a system-wide level but struggle to deliver consistent value at the field level. They want control over the entire decision chain. Data in, recommendation out, execution tracked, performance reported. In theory, this is elegant. In practice, it is brittle. Farms are not controlled environments. They are messy, variable, and full of exceptions. Models don't like exceptions, they average them out, and when you average out reality, you lose the very signals that matter most. The edge cases are where good farmers make their money. Algorithms tend to erase them. This is where efficiency gets misdefined. Corporate efficiency values standardization. Farming efficiency values adaptation. Those two ideas often collide. A standardized recommendation is easier to scale. An adaptive decision is harder to sell. Guess which one dominates the market? The result is technology that optimizes for the average farm that doesn't actually exist. Real farms are uneven. Fields have personalities. Weather behaves differently year to year. Markets swing unpredictably. Any system that claims to smooth all of that is either lying or ignoring risk. Another uncomfortable truth is that many agricultural technologies are designed to generate data first and value second. Data is the product, the farm is the source. Once you see that, a lot of design choices make sense. Why collect everything? Because storage is cheap and optionality is valuable to the platform, not to the farmer. But data without context is just storage overhead. More charts don't create better judgment. They often delay it. Farmers end up waiting for confirmation from a system instead of acting on time-sensitive intuition. In agriculture, timing is everything. Late decisions, even correct ones, are still failures. There is also a quiet de-skilling happening. When systems tell you what to do often enough, you stop practicing the skill of deciding. Over time, experience erodes. Not because farmers are less capable, but because the workflow no longer demands judgment. When the system is wrong, the muscle memory to override it is weaker than it used to be. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. As human expertise declines, systems appear more necessary. As systems become more necessary, human expertise is trusted less. The farm becomes dependent not on better outcomes, but on continued access to tools that claim to produce them. And let's talk about cost, because this is where the math stops working. Technology stacks scale up beautifully on investor slides. On farms, they scale costs faster than returns. Margins in agriculture are thin by nature. Adding recurring expenses without guaranteed payoff is not innovation. It is financial pressure disguised as progress. Most farms don't fail because they are inefficient. They fail because small mistakes compound. Technology that introduces new failure points, new dependencies, and new fixed costs increases the risk surface. It doesn't shrink it. The irony is that the industry keeps asking why adoption isn't faster. The answer is simple. Farmers are rational. They test. They wait. They watch neighbors burn money before they commit. Skepticism is not backwardness, it is survival. The future that actually works will not be fully automated or fully autonomous. It will be selectively augmented. Technology as a lever, not a crutch. Tools that disappear into the background instead of demanding constant attention. The winning farms will not be the most digital ones. They will be the ones with the cleanest workflows, the least noise, the fewest unnecessary decisions, the best alignment between human judgment and machine assistance. And this is where the narrative shifts again. Because the question is no longer whether technology should lead agriculture. It's whether agriculture should finally start telling technology what to become. That question is uncomfortable for an industry built on selling solutions first and proving value later. But it's unavoidable, and it sets up the final confrontation. There is a reason why the most aggressive technology adoption in agriculture rarely comes from farmers themselves. It comes from the ecosystem around them. Governments chasing modernization metrics, corporations chasing data dominance, startups chasing valuation. Everyone is incentivized to push technology forward, even when the field itself is not ready to receive it. Subsidies play a quiet but decisive role here. When governments tie financial support to digital adoption, technology stops being a choice and becomes a requirement. Not because it improves outcomes, but because it checks a box. The farm adopts the tool to access capital, not because the tool earned its place. Efficiency becomes secondary to compliance. Corporations follow a similar logic. Data is leverage. The more farms depend on a platform, the more valuable that platform becomes. Switching costs rise. Lock-in deepens. Interoperability is promised in public and avoided in practice. Once your workflow, history, and equipment are entangled in one system, leaving feels impossible. That dependency is not a bug. It's the business model. Startups amplify this dynamic. Venture capital demands growth, not patience. Agriculture moves in seasons. Investment moves in quarters. The mismatch is structural. To survive, startups oversell. They package partial solutions as revolutions. They turn pilots into press releases. Failure in the field is reframed as early-stage learning. Farmers absorb the risk. Investors absorb the narrative. This is how hype propagates. One successful case study becomes a universal claim. Context disappears. Soil type, climate, scale, management quality. All flattened into a single story of success. When replication fails, the blame shifts back to implementation. The technology itself remains untouchable. What's rarely acknowledged is how these incentives distort research and development. Tools are built to be impressive, not durable. Features that demo well are prioritized over ones that survive mud, dust, heat, and unreliable connectivity. Longevity doesn't photograph well, novelty does. Even universities are pulled into this gravity. Research funding flows toward digital solutions because they align with political narratives of innovation. Low-tech improvements struggle for attention, even when they offer higher return on investment. Knowledge production becomes skewed toward what sounds futuristic, not what works consistently. The result is an industry optimized for storytelling. White papers, conferences, demo days, and panels filled with confident language and vague outcomes. Meanwhile, the everyday reality of farming remains stubbornly analog. Weather is unpredictable. Biology is slow. Mistakes are expensive. This disconnect creates a strange moral pressure. Farmers who question technology are framed as resistant to progress. Skepticism is treated as ignorance. In reality, skepticism is one of the most rational responses to an environment where failure is common and accountability is rare. And yet, the narrative persists. Fully autonomous farms, AI-managed yields, zero human intervention. These ideas are not designed for farmers. They are designed for audiences far removed from the field. Policymakers, investors, media, people who will never have to trust a season's income to a software update. The danger is not that these visions exist. The danger is that they shape policy, funding, and expectations. Farms are pressured to perform according to a future that doesn't align with present constraints. When reality pushes back, the farm is labeled inefficient. The model is never questioned. This is how agriculture ends up adapting itself to technology instead of the other way around. Workflows bend, practices shift, risk tolerance shrinks, all to accommodate systems that were never grounded in the field to begin with. The irony is painful. The industry claims to be data-driven, yet ignores the most consistent data point of all. Farmers adopt what works and reject what doesn't. When adoption stalls, it's not because farmers are slow. It's because the value isn't there. Which leads to the final pivot. If the incentives are misaligned, If the tools are overpromised, and if the risk is unevenly distributed, then the future of agriculture will not be decided by technology alone. It will be decided by who regains control of the decision-making process. And that is where the story ends. Regaining control does not mean rejecting technology. It means redefining the terms under which technology is allowed to exist on a farm. The future of agriculture is not about smarter machines. It is about stricter decision-making. A tool should earn its place. Not because it is new. Not because it is subsidized. Not because everyone else is using it. It earns its place by doing one thing better than the alternative and doing it consistently under real conditions. Dust, mud, bad signal, time pressure, human error. If it fails there, it fails completely. The farms that will survive are not the ones chasing innovation. They are the ones building resilience. Fewer dependencies, clear workflows, redundancy where it matters and simplicity everywhere else. Technology becomes modular, not central. Optional, not mandatory. In this model, data stops being the objective and becomes a byproduct. Only the data that changes decisions is collected. Everything else is noise. Dashboards shrink, alerts disappear, attention returns to the field. The system serves the farmer, not the reverse. Human judgment moves back to the center. Not as a nostalgic ideal, but as a practical necessity. Algorithms are good at pattern recognition. Humans are good at context, timing, and trade-offs. The moment those strengths are inverted, mistakes multiply. The most effective future is cooperative. Machines execute, software advises, humans decide. No illusions of autonomy, no fantasies of replacement, just a clear hierarchy that respects the limits of each component. This also changes how success is measured. Not by adoption rate, not by number of connected devices, but by margin stability, risk reduction, and decision clarity. Quiet gains matter more than flashy demos. The industry will resist this shift. Simplicity is hard to monetize. Restraint does not excite investors. Subtraction does not trend on social media. But agriculture has never been about trends. It has always been about survival over time. The farms that step back, audit their tools, and remove what does not pay for itself will outperform those buried under complexity. Not because they are less modern, but because they are more intentional. The real future of agriculture is not fully digital, fully autonomous, or fully optimized. It is brutally selective, and that is why it will work. There is another layer to this problem that almost never gets discussed, because it's uncomfortable for everyone involved. Technology didn't just change how farms operate. It changed how success in agriculture is perceived from the outside. Visibility became more important than viability. A farm with screens, sensors, and connected machines looks advanced. It photographs well, it fits the narrative of progress. A farm that runs lean, with fewer tools and sharper decisions, looks ordinary, even if it is more profitable and more resilient. The industry rewards appearance long before it verifies outcomes. This creates a feedback loop where farms feel pressured to perform modernity instead of optimizing reality. Being seen as innovative becomes a goal in itself. Demonstrating restraint rarely gets attention. No one invites a farmer to a conference to explain why they removed software, canceled subscriptions, or simplified workflows. Those stories don't sell. Over time, this distorts benchmarking. Farms compare themselves not by margins or stability, but by toolsets. Who has the latest system? Who upgraded first? Who integrated what? The conversation shifts away from agronomy and toward infrastructure. Farming becomes a technology showcase with crops as supporting actors. This is especially dangerous for smaller operations. Large farms can absorb experimentation costs. They can afford failed pilots and unused platforms. Smaller farms cannot, yet they are often pushed the hardest, sold the same tools with the same promises, without the same buffer for error. When technology fails them, it's not a setback. It's existential. The narrative insists that scale will solve everything. More data, more automation, more integration. But scale also amplifies mistakes. A flawed recommendation applied across thousands of hectares is not efficient. It's catastrophic. Technology doesn't eliminate risk, it concentrates it, and still, the push continues. Because stepping back would mean admitting that progress was misdefined, that some paths were taken too quickly. That restraint would have been smarter than acceleration. Industries built on momentum rarely admit that. This is why the most meaningful innovation in agriculture right now isn't happening in labs or startups. It's happening quietly on farms that are auditing themselves. Asking uncomfortable questions, cutting tools, reclaiming judgment, simplifying without apologizing. Those farms don't look futuristic. They look focused. And focus, not complexity, is what keeps operations alive when conditions turn hostile. If you strip everything down, agriculture has always been a decision-making problem under uncertainty. Weather, biology, markets, timing. Technology was supposed to reduce that uncertainty. Instead, it often replaced known unknowns with hidden ones. A farmer understands weather risk. They understand biological variability. Those risks are visible. They can be planned around. Software risk is different. It hides behind confidence. It fails quietly. It encourages trust without understanding. That makes it harder to manage. The farms that win long-term are not the ones eliminating uncertainty. They are the ones choosing which uncertainty they are willing to live with. Natural uncertainty is unavoidable. Artificial complexity is optional. This is the line the industry needs to redraw. Not between old and new, or analog and digital, but between useful and unnecessary. Between tools that sharpen decisions and tools that replace them with noise. The future of agriculture will not be decided by who adopts the most technology first. It will be decided by who adopts it last and best. After testing, after watching failures, after value is proven, not promised. That future will look boring to outsiders. Fewer announcements, fewer revolutions, more quiet consistency, more farms that last decades instead of chasing trends that burn out in seasons. In that future, technology finally finds its proper role. Not as the hero, not as the brain, but as infrastructure. Invisible when it works, easily removed when it doesn't. Farming doesn't need to be smarter. It needs to be calmer, clearer, more intentional. And when agriculture stops trying to impress the future and starts protecting itself from it, that's when real progress finally shows up.